Hey, what's up, guys? So, this is not easy for me to do, but due to difficulties in life, I have had to kind of sell in my half or what I owned of Hoops from the Hills. And I made sure it went back to Couz because he helped build the channel, and I felt like he deserved first crack back at the show, and also he was interested, so it worked out that way. So he will be taking over as host. Please treat him well. As for me, I will be on Locked On West Virginia. I will cover both sports from here on out. So if you just want to hear what I have to say on basketball, it'll be on there. Otherwise, Hoops from the Hills will be where you catch your basketball coverage. And you can get it both places. There's no reason you still can't listen to us both. We just have decided that we're going to be friends and not partners. Sometimes it doesn't work. And so please make sure to treat him well and also come see me over at Locked On West Virginia. Thank you guys for helping build the thing. It meant a lot to me personally. I don't want to take up too much of his time here, but it's meant a lot to me to have it own the show. And if I had it my way, I would have never sold it. But life happens. And unfortunately, I had child support and things like that. You guys know I've been very open about that stuff. So I wanted to let you know that I'm doing what's right in the world, what I have to do. It may not be what I want to do, but at the end of the day, I think you're in good hands. So thank you. Keep coming back to the shows, and I'll see you on Locked On.
Is it basketball season yet? That's what most Mountaineer fans are probably thinking right now, as things around the football program aren't so great. A lot of controversy surrounding it. So we're going to talk a little bit of basketball today. And we're going to do that in this edition of Hoops from the Hills. First off, I want to remind you that no, your eyes aren't deceiving you. This is Couz. I am back on Hoops from the Hills. I want to thank Mountaineer Paul for holding the fort down for the few months he had the show. Appreciate him, giving me the opportunity to get it back. And thanks for the contribution he made to the channel. And obviously, he and I built this thing together originally, so he was an integral part of what we did, of this channel and of this brand. So I want to thank him for that. Be sure to support what he's doing over at Locked On West Virginia. But in the meantime, I'm not doing this alone. I'm going to have some people helping me run this channel, and I'm proud to bring two of those people on tonight on the show. We're going to talk a little bit of Mountaineer hoops. We're going to talk about the Big 12 preseason poll, where the West Virginia was 13th out of 16 teams. We're going to talk about their schedule and what a tough schedule it is, both the non-conference and conference slate. And we're going to close it out by talking about a huge commitment that the Mountaineers got, which has kind of been overshadowed a little bit by football, but I think needs to be talked about, and that's Kelvin Odih, the 4-star recruit that the Mountaineers got a verbal commitment from. We're going to talk about all that on the show. So without further ado, let me bring on my two co-hosts here, Shanna Rose. Shanna, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. And Zachary Siegel. Zachary, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you both for coming on the show and for being part of the Couz's Corner family. You can find Zach and Shanna's work over on the website, couzscorner.com, where they cover both basketball and football over there. And Zachary also has, some other things going on, which I'll let him talk about real quick. Zach, where can everybody find the rest of your work?
So you can find my work at my Twitter at Zach_Siegel32. You can also look up the A to Z Poll podcast, where we mostly talk about college football, not just West Virginia, but college football as a whole. I'll have a very similar background to I have right now. And with that, let's get into some West Virginia hoops.
Let's do it. All right. First thing we're going to talk about tonight today, if you're watching it during the day, is West Virginia and where they were in the preseason poll. Now, under most circumstances, when a poll comes out and it shows West Virginia ranked 13th, fans are going to be up in arms because we're going to feel like West Virginia's being disrespected again. This is different circumstances. But here's the poll. You've got Kansas first, Houston second, Iowa State, Baylor, Arizona, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Kansas State, BYU, TCU, UCF, Arizona State, West Virginia, and then Oklahoma State, Colorado, and Utah, running out to 16 teams. But Shannon, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts when you see this? Do you think West Virginia was disrespected at all, or do you think they're about where they need to be?
No, I think it's pretty fair. Last year they won 6 games. They have basically minus, 2 players. They have a whole new team, a whole new coaching staff. They're coming from a different conference. A lot of players haven't played at this level. So I think it's fair to say, because we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know, it's easy to look at a guy's stats and say, well, this guy did this at Drake, or this guy did this at UIC or wherever. And, I think it's pretty, they're playing in the best basketball conference in the country. They're playing against
Right.
Kansas on a day in, day out, Houston, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. These are some pretty good basketball teams. Utah.
Right. Yeah. Zach, what about you, man? Do you think that's about where West Virginia should be?
So with a new head coach, and this I think happens with football, basketball, really any sport, especially in the college realm. A lot of teams are judged based off returning talent, and at this point, with as talented as you can say West Virginia brought back the players they brought back might be, or they brought in might be, they still weren't like the returning talent that you would have before. So
right,
with a new head coach, I think it's absolutely fair that they are 13th on this list. I think that there's like some small changes that like in between really 10 through 16 that you could really shuffle them anywhere. But especially in a conference this difficult, I think this is more than what I would expect from a program like this.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, I think there's so many unknowns with this group, new players, new staff. Nobody knows what to expect. I mean, yes, you can look at what Darian DeVries did at Drake, which was extremely, where he was extremely successful. You can look at the talent like Tucker DeVries and Javon Small, but how good will they play together? I mean, you look at last year's team, that team was loaded with talent. One of the most talented teams on paper West Virginia's had in a long time, but they won 9 total games, 6, Shannon mentioned 6 in conference. So that, I mean, who would have thought that, right? Because they hadn't played together. They didn't gel well together, right? And in basketball that matters. So I'm cool with it too. Normally, like I said in the opening there, I would normally be mad because I'm like, man, West Virginia's not getting any respect, but it's hard to put them any higher than that when you have zero clue what they're going to look like, So I'm perfectly cool with it. In year one, new coach, new staff, I think 13th is more than fair. What I don't want to say I had a problem with it, but I was a little bit surprised is that Tucker DeVries was held by many to be the biggest pickup in the portal, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 anyway, in the Big 12 this year. He averaged over 20 a game at Drake. He's an NBA prospect, but yet he's nowhere on the preseason All Big 12 team, and he's nowhere on the second team, and not even a newcomer of the year. So what are your all's thoughts on that, Shannon? I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. He was, a star for his dad. Obviously, again, he's coming to a different level where he's going to play against, not saying Drake didn't play against that kind of talent, but it's night in, night out where he's playing against that kind of talent. But I think it is kind of surprising that he's not looked at like some of the other guys.
Right. Zach, you?
Yeah, it's a little surprising. It doesn't really shock me in a conference where you have, Kansas, Houston, Iowa State, Baylor, and Arizona, all AP poll top 25 teams, that West Virginia's 4-star transfer just isn't one of the highlights of the conference. It's a huge pickup for West Virginia, but in the grand scheme of college basketball, I just don't know how it stacks up when you have that many top teams. Honestly, though, like even with a little bit of disrespect there, it's almost exciting as a West Virginia basketball fan to come in with absolutely no expectations of the season, right? Like to come in with like a very fresh slate and be very under the radar. Like all you can do is shock people at this point.
Yep. Great point. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, obviously, the Huggins era was special, West Virginia, right? Bob Huggins, despite how it ended there, it was a special tenure at West Virginia. And it's so odd that we're going to have somebody else on the sidelines this year. Last year was odd, but you still had, with Eilert being there, you still had the Bob Huggins connection, so it didn't feel that new. if that makes sense to me. Now it's a completely fresh slate. It's kind of exciting to me. Like, it's almost like watching a totally different team out there. And that, to me, that's exciting and new. Do you guys agree with that?
It really felt like towards the end of the Bob Huggins era that all you could really but all you could, if you weren't expecting to be, to win the national championship, you were just expecting for like disappointment. But it's fun to have kind of a renewed sense of hope in a program. And maybe even if it doesn't happen this year, which again, new coach, low expectations, if it doesn't happen this year, it's still fun to have that kind of like belief and hope for the first time in a very long time. We've gotten to, hand select this coach, make some real changes, and have one of our most exciting transfer/recruiting classes that we've had in, a very long time.
Right. Shannon, what are your thoughts on the new era?
No, I agree. It's kind of, that's everybody, we've been accustomed to Bob Huggins, and he's been, a staple. He did a lot for the program. It wouldn't be where, it's at without him. So it's kind of sad. It's kind of bittersweet, especially how it ended. You obviously wanted to go out, differently, but I think it is exciting. There's no expectations. Usually you're like, okay, we're second, finish second, and then if you finish like seventh, eighth in the conference, is kind of disappointing. And now we're at the bottom, and it's a change, a new time, and a new excitement, new coach. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know what kind of team's going to be out there on the court this year, and so it's exciting and a little sad at the same time.
Right. Yep, I agree. It is a little sad because I loved Bob Huggins. I really did. He was, he did a lot for the program. The facilities were largely his doing. He raised most of that money, if not all of it. So yeah, he's definitely he's going to go down in my eyes as a legend in Mountaineer basketball, regardless of how his tenure ended.
Yeah,
I'm not going to let that overshadow all the good he did. Not in my opinion, anyway.
Time heals all wounds, and
Absolutely.
I think eventually people will forget, and eventually he'll get what he deserves.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. All right, let's move over now to the next topic we're going to discuss, and that is West Virginia's schedule for this year. I'm going to pull up on the screen here, and we'll talk about it momentarily. This is from WV Sports Now. This is by Ethan Bach, where he put out the season schedule. Obviously, their non-conference slate. Obviously, they start off actually this Friday in an exhibition against Charleston. They do play a secret scrimmage that nobody knows about, but it's secret, and or that everybody knows about, and it's secret, rather. But they don't know who the opponent's going to be. Then they got UMass. They start the regular season with UMass. Then they're at Pitt. Man, second game of the season they have to. Or I'm sorry, Robert Morris. Then UMass. Then Pitt. Man, they get introduced to the backyard brawl in third game of the season. Iona, Gonzaga, and look at this battle for Atlantis bracket. This is what I want to talk about. Look at this bracket: Gonzaga, Indiana, Louisville, Arizona, Davidson, Oklahoma, and Providence.
Hey, no one said it's easy in the Big 12.
No.
Yeah. Wow. But I mean, what are your all's thoughts on this non-conference slate?
It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
And even last year, those games that we were supposed to win, we didn't, like UMass. And I mean, it's a chance for redemption right there, but.
Yeah, good point on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a common theme today is going to be talking about just the fact that we have a new head coach. And I think that with winning these early games, DeVries has a super, super fun, opportunity to take down Pitt right in the beginning of the season, right? That would be great, especially for a fan base who just got to watch for lack of a better term, meltdown in the football game, right? So, I mean, he has, I think, in my opinion, one of, he couldn't ask for a better opportunity right there.
Agreed. And then when you look at the conference slate, obviously it starts off very challenging with Kansas right out of the gate, man. At Kansas, Allen Fieldhouse, December, New Year's Eve, right? Welcome to the Big 12, Darian DeVries. You get Kansas game one. Then their home games, they got Oklahoma State, Arizona at home, 2 road games at Colorado and at Houston. I'm not going to read every game one by one here, but one thing I noticed in the past that West Virginia used to have a lot of road trips where they would do back-to-back away games, right? Like you might go to Kansas and then Kansas State back-to-back, maybe do Baylor or Texas Tech back-to-back, whatever. There's not as much of that in this schedule now. They're not getting that favor, that help, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it just was too hard to do with so many teams. But
yeah,
I mean,
I
really,
think
go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying, I think in this era of conference realignment, things like that are just going to be harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least we're not in the ACC where you can get Cal one week and then North Carolina the next week, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little far, a little inconvenient, but I think that's above the pay grade of a speculatory people.
Right, agreed. But what are your thoughts overall when you look at this Big 12 slate? I mean, when you look at the home games versus the away games and who they play twice, they play Cincinnati twice. They play, see who else they play twice. BYU, I think, twice. Yep, Utah twice. TCU twice. What are your thoughts overall on this Big 12 schedule? Do you like the way it laid out for West Virginia, or do you see more disadvantages than advantages?
I mean, I think the fact that we get Kansas right off the bat it's a little bit unfortunate, but it was going to happen, eventually, and it might not be a bad thing for the overall. Like, it might not be a bad thing in Darian DeVries' coaching career to have to deal with that kind of getting their butts handed to him early,
mm-hmm.
to try to maybe rally that team around him, or create a culture that the programs that have a consistent chip on their shoulder are usually the ones that do the best. And if we can establish that as early as possible, then who knows, that could lead to some better wins later in the season. With as far as the games that how it laid out for us, it has kind of felt like since Cincinnati got into the Big 12 that the Big 12 from a bigwig standpoint has been pushing kind of this West Virginia Cincinnati closest to each other regional rivalry,
Mm-hmm.
which honestly I'm not really against. It would be nice to have more of a basketball stake in the Big 12 than we already do. Especially with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, two schools that I know most West Virginia fans did not have the best emotions towards. To get something else that you can get fans to rally behind and really get angry at this team would I think be a good thing for the program overall. And I think the final point that I'll make with this roster is that this schedule is that going through it initially, and I said this. I've said this before. Going through it initially, I was trying to think of the games that I thought were the most important, and I found myself writing down all the ranked games, and I thought those are not the most important games. The most important games are the ones that West Virginia has a shot at winning, and that they should win. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing for a new head coach and a lot of new players, and Darian DeVries, is to win the games that you should win. So, like Shanna said earlier, beating UMass this year, handling Robert Morris, handling some of these schools that we should beat, beating a TCU, beating, the schools that are right around us, and, having an ability to persevere.
Great point. Shanna, what are your thoughts on the Big 12 schedule?
I agree with Zach on that. I think, like you said, you want to win these games at the beginning of the year that you should. You don't want to go out and lose. Like last season, they lost some of those games.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like Robert Morris, UMass. These are games, North Carolina Central, they're games that we should win.
Right.
It's games that these guys are going to go out there, kind of learn how to gel together, learn how to play, learn their roles. And I think last year that was kind of like part of what took a toll. They had so many different players like in and out, and they couldn't ever gel together. They could never kind of figure out roles. And when one guy came back, then it was like so-and-so who was a star couldn't figure it out. And I think those games are going to be what matters more so than like the Kansas. Like, yeah, it's going to be great if we go into Allen Fieldhouse and win. But realistically, they're probably not. And that's fine too. And yeah, you get that out of the way right there. But I think, yeah, how they perform the first half of the season during the out of conference schedule, I kind of think will play into how they play in the conference. And it's the toughest basketball conference in the country. I firmly believe that. And the travel schedule, I mean, you have like, you're in Colorado on January 12th, and then you're in Houston on January 15th. It's no
Mhm.
more of the Baylor TCU, where you're traveling an hour to get there or whatever
Yep.
it was.
Exactly.
And then they're coming home and playing Iowa State.
Right.
So
Who's
it's
a top 5 team, right?
yeah,
Top 10
yeah,
team.
I think so.
In the conference, I mean, top 5
Yeah.
in the conference.
Yeah.
When I look at the conference schedule, I obviously agree with both of you guys. It's very important that they knock out those must-win games early in the year. They've got to win those. And getting started with Kansas, to me, I looked at that as a disadvantage. But the more I think about it, you get that game out of the way and you're done with it, right? And it's a great introduction to Big 12 basketball for these guys. And then from then on out, not saying it's going to get easier, but it shouldn't get tougher, right? Than going into Fog Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they do have to play Houston twice, which I'm not happy about. But they only play Arizona once, and they only play Baylor once. And those are, again, two of the better teams on paper, at least in the preseason in the conference.
Yeah.
So I think that helps a little bit. And as far as I can tell, I think they only play I think they only play Iowa State once. So really some of the top teams in the conference, with the exception of Houston, they only play one time. And I think that when you're breaking in a new team with a new staff, I think that's going to be important that they they're playing on paper some of the bottom teams, and some of them multiple times.
Right. Because Cincinnati, I think, is a game that they could possibly go and win both of those.
Right.
I think Utah, especially like at home, I think, that might mean something to Josh Eilert. So that could be like a little bit of a trap game.
Yeah, true. But the good thing, Eilert's not going to know anything about this team.
True.
There's no advantage there. That's one good thing. The only player he's going to know anything about is Ofri Nave, and to be honest, I'm not sure how much he'll play this year.
Yeah, I don't know.
I hope he plays a lot. I love Ofri. He's an awesome kid, or young man, I should say. But, I really hope he does get to play some. But
I feel like the biggest thing to remember, with this schedule and with this team this year, and I've reiterated this a few times, just being patient with this team, right? Like as we talked about, you got so many new players, even the veteran players are new to this program, right? So and as being in such a tough schedule, I think it's just super important to know. And this schedule could get tougher throughout the year. We could absolutely see a team like Utah, see a team like Texas Tech, see a team like TCU find themselves with a couple of crazy good wins and ranked by the time we play them, right? This conference's ceiling is about as high as you can get.
Yep.
But I think if Tucker DeVries has if this experiment works here, this Tucker DeVries hire works here, this will be his worst season, right? This will most likely be the worst season that Tucker DeVries has as the head coach of West Virginia basketball. And that's just to be expected because he is, the number, he is a first year head coach. And that's just how things work, especially in tough conferences.
Right. First year at this level. Yeah, absolutely. What, when you look, obviously, when you looked at the AP top 25 that came out a few days ago, and I think we touched on this earlier, Big 12 has 5 of the top 10 teams in that poll, right?
5 of the top 10, 6 of the top 25.
Yeah. So, it's an absolutely brutal schedule. So, to me, there's no argument, at least now, that it's the toughest league in America. So,
and
what are
Texas Tech, Kansas State, BYU, and TCU all receive votes too. So it's not like we have any, slouches in this conference.
So, Shannon, I'll start with you. What are your Shannon, in your mind, what is a reasonable expectation for this team this year?
I think they'll go. I think if they win a couple of those games that maybe you don't expect them to, like maybe if they beat like an Iowa State at home or I don't know, even a Houston at home, kind of get that big, that upset, that big upset that everybody, wants to see. But I think realistically, like, if they go out there and they beat Pitt, they win the games they're supposed to win, beat Pitt, beat Iona. I don't know how much they're really going to do in that battle for Atlanta's tournament. That's that's kind of brutal. I
Yeah.
don't know how well they'll be against Gonzaga. I mean,
Yeah.
Louisville or Indiana, even, they may stand a chance if they could pull off a win there for somebody. But I think, reasonably, you shouldn't have high expectations. I, I think they'll win more than they won more games than they won last year, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that it'll be a whole lot more. I think you just gotta kind of take it for what it is. Like you said, it's probably going to be the worst season in the under the new coach and the staff, because he's gonna, even though he did have more time to put together a roster, like he's still going to go out and get his recruits, and then he's going to build, like, guys are going to look at whatever this team does and his coaching style, and then transfers for next year. Like, this is his chance to build and make this program what it is. And I think year 2, 3, 4 and so on are going to be where you see like the bigger results.
Right. That's fair. Totally fair. Zach, what about you? What are realistic expectations for Mountaineer fans?
So I just went through and counted our ranked to unranked ratio. We have a preseason 20 ranked players, or 20 ranked teams we play against, and 9 unranked. Now, like I said a minute ago, in the Big 12, I think that's subject to change. You could have a team like Cincinnati, who's ranked 20, drop out after if they have a couple early season bad losses. You could also have a team like BYU have a couple really good losses in the beginning of the season and find their way back in. So having that, between 18 and 20 unranked opponents, I agree with Shen. I think we're going to have more than 9 wins from last year. But I also think that part of this is, and part of the reason we hired Darian DeVries is his style of play, or his style of coaching, where he runs a very non-big man centric kind of fast-paced pick and roll team that could lead a team like Kansas, who really relies on center Hunter Dickinson to maybe struggle a little bit, at least in the beginning, and give maybe some of these other teams who will probably look past, a first-year head coach, a first-year in the program head coach team like West Virginia, maybe shock some of these other teams. So I think, we have, Darian DeVries doesn't work out, terrible floor, but I think our ceiling is maybe even higher than people are expecting. And I think that we're just going to see, like, we're so accustomed to Bob Huggins basketball, we're going to see such a different style of West Virginia basketball. It's no longer press Virginia. It's Darian DeVries' new way of doing things.
Yeah. And I'm excited about that because, I mean, just listening to him talk, he sounds to me like he's more, I'm not going to say he's like John Beilein, but I think he's going to be closer to a John Beilein style team than what a Bob Huggins team is. They like to play fast. They do a lot of backdoor cuts, a lot of pick and pop, pick and roll type things. I'm envisioning Kevin Pittsnoggle hitting threes at the top of the key, right? I know that's not going to be what they're doing, but my head always goes back to the glory days. But anyway, Kevin Pittsnoggle is probably my favorite player in the history of West Virginia basketball, so had to throw a shout out there. But anyway, and, he likes to play fast, which, Huggins offensively anyway used to like to slow things down and be more methodical. And so I'm kind of excited about this new style of basketball, to be honest. I wasn't a huge fan of Huggins' style offensively. I thought it could get a little boring at times, to be honest. So I'm excited about this new style. And I'm really excited about what Coach DeVries is bringing. But as far as expectations for me, I think if they can finish 500 on the year, I think that's a good year for a first-year head coach. If they can win 16 games, 15,
Very
16,
realistic.
whatever that, I think that's a pretty darn good year now I know the team's expectations are going to be much higher than that. Don't get me wrong. But for me, as an observer and as a fan, I think 500 record is a pretty lofty goal and lofty expectation for this team. I don't really expect anything better than that.
And everybody having such low expectations, that should fuel the players. Like, that should fuel them to wanna do better, to want to prove people wrong. Like, they should play with a chip on their shoulder. Like, Tucker DeVries, he should want to go out there and be like, okay, well, I wasn't mentioned. Like that should make him want to go out there and prove people
Absolutely.
like that he belongs, he deserves this,
Yep.
and hopefully that's what it does.
Yep. I agree.
I
And I think it will.
also don't. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's I was just going to say I don't think, and I think it will fuel him and the team.
I also don't know if we're going to be like if this year we're going to see a really any kind of style under Darian DeVries, if we're really going to see like, you know, a breakout player as much as we're going to see more of like because of such this fast paced move the ball, get, you know, take opportunities, get open kind of situation, kind of offense that he runs. I think we're going to see a lot more of an even spread of point share around the team. Like I don't think, you know, we saw, you know, Tucker DeVries average 24 and some change at Drake last year, but I would not expect that this year. But what I would expect is the assist numbers to go up for almost everybody. That was something Javon Small was very good at Oklahoma State last year. And I think that this team is going to have a big emphasis on moving the ball around and making it very difficult for these really good teams to pinpoint and bully one player.
Very great point. Great point. Let's move on now to the final segment of the show, and that is we're going to talk about a commitment West Virginia got from a really talented high school player named Kelvin Odih. Shannon actually did an article on this over at Couz'sCorner.com, so shout out to her. But that article's up on the screen now. But he's a 4-star recruit. I think he had a 91 rating over at 24/7 Sports, so very, very high rating. 6 foot 490-pound forward, senior at SoCal Academy in California. I'm not going to try to pronounce the city. You know, Odih is a threat on the perimeter because of his strength, physicality, and athleticism. He excels at both ends of the floor. He's a native of Connecticut, so, you know, he's not that far from home, which is good. And is aggressive on the back and puts pressure on opponents. He's capable of forcing turnovers. I did watch some film on him, and I noticed I like his length on the floor defensively, and I love his ability offensively he has a very quick first step, and I think he'll be able to penetrate and get to the rim. At least that's the first thing that popped out to me. Shannon, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Kelvin Odih and his commitment to West Virginia, and what does this mean for the program?
I think it's a big pickup because it's, you know, it's a 4-star, so everybody wants 4-star players. So it goes out and it tells you that he trusts the coaching staff. He trusts, you know, he believes in what they're, you know, they're selling something to him that makes him believe in this program and that it can be, you know, good for him, and, you know, there's a good future ahead. I think he'll you know, hopefully fit into, you know, the system, and he's very athletic, he's very talented. You know, he could come here and, you know, kind of, a lot of these guys won't be here next year. You know, so he could come here and kind of, you know, make this his own program, like if he stays,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
kind of like guys like Javon Carter and them did.
Yep.
In the past.
Absolutely. Make a name for himself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zach, what are your thoughts about Odih and his commitment?
Yeah, so he averaged 19, 11 and a half, and 3.2 last year, just as a junior. At where, you know, in LaSalle Academy. He has since gone to SoCal Academy. He's only 6'4", which I say only, like, that's not really tall, but in the world of basketball, that's not, you know, the biggest person ever. That being said, he plays a lot bigger than 6'4", and I think that in this, you know, in this Darian DeVries offense that I've been harping on, that I've been harping on, is he would play very well because that offense really utilizes that, like you said, the quick step, the ability to move the ball around, and his length, I think, is really going to help. It's really going to help him here. The only thing, and, you know, I know we probably don't want to hear this, but the only thing with that kind of concerns me is, so his composite was a 97.5, which on 24/7, which is super high. And I think he, you know, my hunch is that he transferred across the country to potentially continue to, you know, market himself and recruit himself to a bigger market. And as excited as I am about this Kelvin Odih commitment, if he turns into if he gets his overall up into the 5 range, we might see a much bigger wave of competition outside of Rutgers, Marquette, Colorado, Louisville, coming in and trying to recruit him.
And I don't know, he says he's really from Connecticut. He may not have. I don't know how long he actually lived in Connecticut, but obviously the first program that comes to my mind is UConn, right? UConn could come call him.
I mean,
when I hear that, that's who doesn't. I mean, they're the best program in America right now. So
I would imagine if UConn was knocking at his door, he wouldn't have moved across the country away from him.
Right.
I believe he did live in Connecticut, but he was going to school in Rhode Island.
Right. Oh, Rhode Island. Okay, got it.
That being said, he's kind of on that cusp of being like one of those like almost 5-star, very elite players that in this bigger spotlight could be, not beneficial to West Virginia's recruiting platform. But I do think this will also very much depend on, how DeVries performs in a lot of these games in his first year. If he goes out and we have some unfortunate blowouts, like we lose bad to like a TCU or a school or like a Colorado, and this Darian DeVries style of offense that, he seems like he would fit so well into just isn't working. That might be his wake up call to go try to, go somewhere else. On the flip side, if we shock some teams and Darian's offense and his schemes work out better than we thought, that might be, an even stronger commitment from him. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we can always, as West Virginia fans, we're kind of trained to expect the worst, but it's hard not to sometimes. But, I feel like there's something there he likes. And, I think even if they're not able to keep him, right, I think this shows that this staff is able to go out and get talented guys. And I think it shows that we have good recruiters. There's good recruiters on that staff. I know Chester Frazier has been talked about a lot for his recruiting ability. He obviously did great in, getting guys out of the portal with Amani Hansberry and some of those others, Sincere Harris. Those two come to mind who followed him from Illinois. But if they can keep that staff together and that recruiting staff, I feel pretty good about the future. Because, Huggins, he didn't get a whole lot of 4-star guys. He got a few, but not a lot. And for this staff to be able to land a commitment from a 4-star prospect in year one, I think that speaks volumes to their recruiting ability. And hopefully shows us that West Virginia's in a good spot from an NIL standpoint too, because I'm sure this young man probably had a lot of NIL money, come up in discussions. So I think that bodes well for Mountaineers going forward as well. What are your thoughts on that overall? The thought about the NIL piece.
I think that, like you said, we're in a pretty good spot NIL wise, and I think that a big portion of that comes from the fact that the dollar stretches further in a basketball sense because there's just less players that you have to account for, right? On a football team, you're not paying all of them this large sum of money, but you got over 100 kids on that squad. In basketball, 15, 20 on a team.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really try to go more aggressively after these top players with the limited funds that you have. I also think that NIL might have, hit a slight boost this year with the hiring of Darian DeVries, just because of the level of excitement. Even if your expectations are, in the gutter, there's still probably some level of excitement among change and a coach, especially with a coach who has some level of proven success and all these, like you said, Bob Huggins didn't bring in a lot of 4-stars. He was a huge, he harped a lot on the idea of developing players that he saw 1 or 2 really good skills in and building the rest of them. Darian DeVries is bringing in a lot more polished pieces to the puzzle that, hopefully we'll be able to see, some more, some quicker success.
Correct. Shannon, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think we have a solid NIL, and like you said, there's a lot less basketball players than there are football players. So that does, there is more money per, to hand out versus spreading it out for 100 guys. And I do think people are excited. I think people I saw, over the last couple of years of Huggins' career before everything blew up, especially when they maybe didn't perform as well as they were expected. There was a lot of people who thought he was aging and thought that his style was, going out, and that he wasn't. They wanted a change. They wanted somebody younger. They wanted
Mhm.
a new team, and now they kind of get that. So that may give, some of these big name donors like more, contribute more to it. So I think that the NIL is in a good place, and I think that is going to encourage players. Like, sure, we're not going to have like the NIL that Kentucky has or Kansas has, but if you can get, you're at West Virginia, like if you can go to West Virginia, and you're not sharing, you don't have 6, 7 stars that Kentucky has necessarily.
Right.
Like, so that for a guy like that who's a 4-star player who has to share it with other guys, he's going to get maybe a little bit more than he would get out of Kentucky.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I get it. He's going to be the big dog
Yeah.
on campus. He'll get kind of a bigger percentage of the pie, so to speak.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. Well, we'll wrap this up here. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show again. You're going to see more of our faces going forward as we start to kick off the basketball season here. Obviously, Mountaineers kick off with an exhibition game on Friday against University of Charleston, Division II team in the state of West Virginia. Obviously, we expect them to blow that team out, but it'll be a good opportunity just for us to see this group of guys together for the first time. It'll be interesting to see. It'll probably be on television somewhere. So at least I hope it is anyway. It usually is. So I'll be looking forward to that. But Shanna, Zach, I thank you both for coming on and appreciate you guys being a part of the team, and I look forward to working with you more going forward. And again, you can find both of their work over at Couz'sCorner.com. Shanna is our lead editor over there. She does a great job covering all sports, but basketball is her number one passion. So she does a lot about basketball. And then Zach's been doing the football previews for us each week over there, and he also has his own podcast. Zach, again, what's the name of that podcast?
It's the A to Z Poll podcast,
and he covers college football across the country. So go check that out. And we look forward to bringing you guys a lot more West Virginia basketball content here on Hoops from the Hills. And we appreciate you tuning into the show.
awesome.
We're out.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks.